Welcome to the Deconstructed Woman podcast, a podcast about breaking down barriers between women, exploring and sharing perspectives of each individual woman's experience, and discovering what we have in common and what makes us different. Hosted by Elisa Marie and Joji.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Joji with Alyssa Murray, and we're going to be talking today about why people take things so personally and how it can really be disruptive to people's relationships, whether at home, work, friendships, and the like. I was having a conversation yesterday with the woman who was cutting my hair, and she was talking about a situation where one of her friends from the hair shop like 10, 15 years ago. Both of them owned their own businesses. So they're busy with their personal lives and their professional lives. And she had sort of randomly um, texted her. And because my stylist didn't get into a long drawn texting conversation with her because she was in the middle of making dinner, the next day she unfriended her and basically sent her like a Nastagram and even took her husband off Facebook and like went through this whole process without even asking her like or saying like what was going on yesterday or this really bothered me. And so Alyssa and I were talking about the whole topic of taking things personally. And I had watched a video it randomly, and it's from Therapy in a Nutshell. And the author is Emma McAdam, and she has YouTube videos. And yeah, I just ran across it, and it was sort of the title of this video is How to Stop Taking Things Personally. And so I shared it with Alyssa and sort of said, hey, is this sort of a topic? I don't know what you feel about this, but it's something that I seem to be sort of around right now. And then she said, oh yeah, actually you're on the call. Alyssa, you can say what you said. So I'll talk you in right now and you can say how you responded to the topic.
Yeah, I'm saying, and I think we talked a little bit before we got on here, is that I think that happens a lot of times where, I gave the example of you're walking in the supermarket and somebody bumps into you and they don't say, oh, I'm sorry. And the immediate thought is, oh, they're so rude or, what's their problem or whatnot. But I think that it really takes, we talked about being critical thinker, or it takes a certain amount of maturity to say, maybe something's going on with that person. Maybe they're having a rough day. Maybe that was just, they're not even here right now. They're not present in the moment. Maybe something horrific has just happened to them. We don't know what's happening to other people. We don't know what's going on with them. And we're definitely not mind readers. And so it's really hard to make assumptions and take something personally when that may not be what's going on for the other person. And so I was giving the example of when I was about to go on maternity leave, I had been checking my email and trying to finish up work before I left. And I had a coworker who had, I think she had text messaged me and said like, oh, remember, don't check your email while you're on maternity leave. And she just happened to be the third person who had said it to me that day. And so I was really short with her and kind of went into this whole thing of like, I'm not checking my email. I just checked it earlier today because I wanted to make sure everything was, right as it should be before I went on maternity leave. And she was like, oh, what's going on? And I was like, I'm just stressed out. And so we had a conversation about it. You're like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it to come across that way. It wasn't meant in a rude way. And I was like, oh, thanks. I'm sorry too. I didn't mean to snap at you. I'm just, trying to get all the T's crossed and the I's dotted. And she was very mature about that. I felt like, we were able to kind of move on from that and no foul, no harm done. And I think that that's, how situations should go, or, one way that they can go. But I think that it's hard sometimes because, a lot can get lost in translation in text messages or even email. And we have so much technology at our fingertips. I was, I was going to say a lot of arguments over social media occur as a misunderstanding or taking things personally that really you have to take those with a grain of salt. So I don't know, Joji, if you've had that or seen that experience, but I know I've seen that quite a bit in social media where people say something and then all of a sudden it gets turned, back on itself. And it's like, well, that I don't even know if that was the initial person's intention, but that's the way that it went.
Yeah, I can think of a couple different situations where, especially in my family, where somebody made just a general comment and it was really taken out of context. And, one person just reads so much into it and then, you know, starts to draw some boundaries around that relationship. And it really isn't all that necessary. And I think that there's personality type of somebody who, can blow things out of proportion and is almost looking to provoke a situation that is not necessary. And I do feel like it is a sign of, maturity. And I don't mean maturity by age, but emotional maturity where if you're not going to call somebody and say, hey, how did you mean that? Because I took it this way. If you're just going to stew about it and not let the other person, give you their feedback about what happened, then I feel like you're not really looking for that. You're looking for a reason almost, I feel like, to get angry and to hold a grudge. And I really feel like, at my age, the one thing that I've learned and I've had to learn over and over again is that the only person it harms holding a grudge and letting it consume you is you. The other person doesn't even know that they've done anything, most of the time. I'm not talking about, somebody who gets into it with you. I mean, this person made just a very flippant comment and a lot of it was read into it. And then it was like, oh, I can't believe this. And that they're making these comments and on the family chat or something. And it's like, and I'm not really looking to get into it. I just stay out of it. But in my mind, I'm thinking, what a waste of energy. Like we don't, we have a family chat or something because we're trying to stay connected for people who are all over, the country, all over the world, maybe. And instead of looking at it as a tool to help communication and stay connected, why would you read into something to that extent where now you're saying, well, I'm going to cut them out of my life? It seems like a lot to do for something that is simply based on something that that person probably didn't even understand. Or they were talking about it from a different perspective. And there isn't a lot of critical thinking that goes on. And I had been sharing with Alyssa when we were talking as we were getting ready for this podcast, that I've had to work diligently on that probably since the age of, I'd say 35 to 40. I would say that I had to, instead of making some assumption, sort of force myself to say, come up with 3 reasons why this person's behavior could have landed in this way. And I think that somebody bumping into you on the grocery store is a very good example of that. Somebody who, you're trying to back up and they fly by and you slam on your brakes because you think you're going to hit them and they don't even stop to say anything. They just rush off. I mean, those are the situations I think of where, you just start swearing and you're like, oh my gosh. And you're angry because you could have, gotten hurt or somebody else could have gotten hurt. But the reality is you don't know what happened. Did they miss it? Were they trying to just get past you? Did they get a 911 phone call from their family because somebody was rushed to the emergency room? Like, you don't know. And I think that you can calm yourself down if you think about some scenarios, because I think that our first reaction is very self-focused. Like, what does this say about me? Or what is this about me? And then the more you can move it out and look at it from something that doesn't have to do with you and really make it on about them. They're rushing to get somewhere. And sometimes I think to myself, make it a dramatic story on the other person. Yeah, maybe they got a phone call from their spouse because their kid fell off and they're taking them to the ER, because then I don't feel as bad. And maybe I'm just lying to myself. But in a lot of ways, I let it go a lot faster than really making it a personal vendetta against me, even though this person doesn't know me, or something like that. So I don't know if that works for you, but that's the way I've sort of tried to handle it in my own life. And I've gotten a lot more generous, I would say. And I really have noticed that now, you know, 15 years later of working with that, those 3 explanations come almost automatically to me. I don't even have to think about it, make it an exercise for myself. And then I've moved on in less than like 2 minutes. Whereas before I would hang on to it for a long, long time. How about you, Alyssa? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think that I mean, I think you're saying all the things that I'm still trying to teach myself with. Um, I also find that, so I think maybe I've mentioned in the past, but So I'm an empath. I kind of absorb other people's emotions, and I've also learned that I don't need to do that. It's something that I can like feel the tension in the room when two people who are having conflict walk in. I can feel anxiety when, somebody's really nervous. And so it's really hard. And sometimes I will take that personally, like, oh, what did I do? And that is a habit that I am trying to really break now, because I know in my mind I haven't done anything. I know I haven't done anything, but why am I thinking I did? Like, why am I quick to apologize or, talk to that person or try to figure out what's going on? Like, if somebody's feeling the way that they're feeling, I didn't cause that. That is how they're feeling. And if there isn't any immediate thing that I can think of that I possibly did, that's them. It's not me. And so I've had to separate that a little bit over time to be able to say, okay, they're feeling this way. That doesn't have anything to do with me. I'm not going to take this personally. And it's okay to just kind of like sit in that in some ways without reacting or without responding to it. And I'm sure that's for a small group of people who maybe understand what I'm talking about. But I think that that's another piece of it too. The other thing that came up for me was thinking about my children, because we've talked about parenting and things like that, and recognizing that if they're acting out, it's not me that's causing that. Something's going on with them. So I think that the mentality here is really shifting away from I and looking at the other person. And so, like I said before, I think putting ourselves in other people's shoes, because that has been really helping me as a parent to be able to say, okay, my kid is having a meltdown. They're having a hard time right now. What's going on for them? It's not, they're not trying to make me angry. They're not trying to piss me off. They're just having a hard time. How can I help them? So those are two ways that I have tried to shift my mentality, kind of like your critical thinking. But like you said, it takes practice. It really takes a shift in your mentality and how you view things. And if you do have those bad habits of apologizing right away, or, somebody walks in the room and they're really gruff and you're like, oh my gosh, what did I do wrong? Like, I think that's something that needs to be challenged because you're going to end up apologizing for something you didn't do, or, kind of always shortchanging yourself. And I think that that is a really unfortunate side effect of noticing other people's, feelings and things like that. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And when you were talking, I was thinking about just like, family of origin stuff and thinking about, boy, my whole life, I'm the middle child. And so I've always been like the peacekeeper, the negotiator, the person who's trying to, work out the conflict. And one of the hardest lessons there's two hard lessons for me. One, silence is golden. Right. So, in the sense that if it's not your conflict, there's no reason for you to be involved in it. That's taken me, like, I feel like my whole life to get involved with and understand that, and to let two other people deal with it in the way, and that I don't have to be responsible to do anything with it because I'm not involved with it. And most of the time, especially with my brothers, if I ever did that, they would turn against me. And I don't know why, it just always happened that way. And then the other thing too is no, I forgot the second thing, but it'll come back to me, the two things that I was going to say. But I just the biggest thing is to realize that it's not mine to do, and silence is very difficult for me. I mean, I try to, even as a therapist, when you're being trained, I mean, a lot of it is you have to get comfortable in that space. You have to be able to hold that. You have to be able to hold yourself in that space and let people own their emotions without you having to fill in the space. And that was something that I would do because of my nervousness or my habitual sort of trying to solve the problem, get people to talk and resolve. And it really is something you have to work through. And it helped me a lot understand my role in my family and to say, you know what, I don't need to be involved with this and it's not my place. And sort of give people the opportunity to get to it when they do. And if they don't, they don't. And I think it's really hard in a family to be able to have in this particular situation, my siblings or my family members, not get along. I mean, that is hard for me to deal with. But I also realize that it's not my work and I have to be able to be okay with that. And sometimes that's really challenging to do because of the role that you have for, at a certain age, the majority of your life. I mean, now I'm well beyond that. But my husband makes this comment that as we get closer and closer to Michigan, right? So my family's in Michigan, I'm in Chicago, and so as I'm driving, like he says, the closer you get to your family's home, the more anxious you physically become. And he said, I don't know why, after all these years, you still get that way. And when he mentioned it to me, I've started noticing that. And I think I've done a better job of being able to be like, why am I acting that way? Like, I'm coming here on like a little mini vacation or it's supposed to be a fun time or a fun event. There's nothing, I don't have to, you know, get myself all worked up. But I know that's a strange thing, but I think it's all connected to like what my role is and what I've expected, will happen or could happen or what I should do or fix or whatever. So it's sort of a crazy kind of a thing, but that's just a pattern that I've been working really hard to break.
Well, I was gonna say we probably could do another episode on that particular topic because I we have that in common. I think I also have that same thing where if as we get closer to my home of origin, I just get more and more anxious and kind of anticipating certain ways things are gonna go. And sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised and they don't turn out that way, and sometimes they turn out in different ways. So I'm we'll have to dive a little bit more into that and kind of look at whether that's maybe a common theme or just for us. But I imagine for a lot of people, there's patterns that emerge from our early childhood and even like early adulthood that kind of carry into that. And we might shift based upon expectations of others. But I think that, a lot of times taking things personally, it really, I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand with what you're talking about. I mean, it does create a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress, I think, for people to be, if you think about so the idea or the, example of the grocery store, like you kind of have that experience where somebody bumps into you. And then if you're not able to let that go, like you were saying, it kind of carries into your next interaction, maybe with the, as you're checking out and as you're pulling out, and then somebody cuts you off. And then it just kind of, you know, spirals into a bad day, if you will. And I think that there's a lot to be said that we all have enough stress in our life, and adding to it with those kind of experiences, I think just kind of, is the topping on the cake. And so it's really, I think it's important to note that, if you're able to shift those interactions with complete strangers, hopefully that lessens some of the stress. And then if you carry that into your workplace, if you work outside the home or even if you work in your home too, interactions with coworkers, not taking it personally, just kind of keeping it at, if you don't know if they're having a bad day or if somebody says something sharp to you, being able to say that's, not likely a representation of something I'm doing. It's maybe something that's going on with them, and still kind of shifting that. And then even when you get home after a long day, and maybe your partner says something and you're like, gosh, you know, that was unnecessary. I think recognizing that they might have had a really rough day too. So, I think that it kind of carries into all facets of our life that we need to kind of shift out of that mentality of it's me, I'm causing this, or, what did I do? Like, I didn't do anything to them. Like, if you didn't do anything, then it's most likely not you, it's most likely them. Now, that doesn't account for, if there are bigger situations or problems that you are involved in, but hopefully, again, that goes back to that emotional maturity and being able to communicate and kind of work that out. So I think that it's helpful to get a reminder that we don't have to take everything personally, not to say, because I think the video that you mentioned, it kind of separated like sensitivity versus taking things personally. And we're not talking about being sensitive to things, but more so that idea of not taking things personally and recognizing that, whatever's said to you really doesn't have to carry into the rest of your day.
Yeah, the other thing I was thinking of too, and I'm glad you mentioned the video because I was going to just just to share a little bit more about it. So Emma McAdam in the video, once one of the things that she talked about that was a really good reminder too was the fact that there's something called secondary gain. And so secondary gain is it's sort of hard for me to explain it, but it's sort of getting something for this behavior. It's not your primary intent, but there's a benefit that you get out of doing this behavior. So if you take things personally, one of the things that she sort of challenges us to say is, well, what are you getting from that? Is there something that is happening that you may not consciously be aware of the fact that you're benefiting from it? But either it's making you angry or it's finally giving you the oomph to, do something you might not have done. But then what ends up happening in some of those situations is that you may regret that because you're not really doing it for the right reason or you're, acting out of character for yourself. I don't think I gave the best definition of secondary gain. Do you, Alyssa, have a better definition for it? I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I can't come up with like what a good example of it is either.
I'm thinking like if a homeless person rob a store and get something so that they can get locked up so that they have a warm bed for the night. Like that's like a secondary gain. Like they're doing it for the purpose of getting something, even though the first action isn't necessarily it doesn't equate into what they were trying to do.
It's about understanding, what motivates us. And if there's a pattern in our life, and if it's something that we want to break, we want to, sort of break this habit of taking everything personally because you're really pushing people away from you when you do that. And you're also, because the one thing that, I had said to my hairdresser yesterday was, this person might have been trying to reach out for connection, but ultimately what she ended up doing was ending a relationship that she might have really wanted or needed in her life. And so the difficulty is that she's sending one message, but really maybe she might have been craving another. And so, but she'll never know. And, my hairdresser won't ever know because they ended that relationship. And my hairdresser actually said, I'm sort of relieved. She's a high maintenance kind of a person. She's needy when it's convenient for her. She doesn't really, it's not a mutual relationship. So she said, she probably doesn't realize how happy I am that this actually happened. And she said, and because of the way she did it, I don't even feel bad about it. I almost feel like, great. It just, gives me a little bit more time and, one less person who needs more than I can give them at this point in my life, gone. And she was like, so, I don't even feel bad. She said, I actually feel pretty damn good about it. And so it's sort of interesting to me because the person got angry because she didn't give her more time, but now she's released her from giving her any time. And, it's not what she wanted, but ultimately that's what she asked for. And this person just called her bluff, if that's what it was. And now it's like they have no relationship. And one person is probably going to regret that. And the other person is probably going to, clearly is like, well, didn't have to invest, didn't initiate that and actually removes any guilt that she even had. And so it actually ended up working out in a way that I'm sure the original person didn't plan on. But ultimately, their lack of honesty or a lack of tolerance or, playing their cards the way that they did just sort of ended a relationship that had some tenure to it. And I bet I just have a feeling it's not exactly what she wanted to happen, but ultimately she forced her hand. And that is what happened. And I think that's what you realize also is that, and that's the other thing that we got into was the difference between some people, like some of my best friends, like I don't feel like I have to like go back and reinstate that relationship. Like we may not talk but once a year or something, but when we do talk, we don't have to say, I'm sorry for not calling you. You just pick up where you left off and you understand that each other's lives are complicated or you have lots going on or whatever's happening in your life. And you just assume that there is, we're all make it happen. I get very offended when people assume that I'm not calling them purposely, and that's something that I am so over at this point in my life because it's like, you don't know what's going on in my life. You don't even have the courtesy to ask me like what all is going on or like what stresses have I had. You're just making it about you. And I sort of feel like I'm just so over that. And I'm Then I feel like I start listing, well, this is what I'm doing. I'm working, you know, I love this podcast I'm doing. I got to prepare for that. I'm in a marriage, I have a relationship, and, go on and on and on. And you're just like, well, wait a minute. Why do I have to justify the lack of my time in my life to somebody else? Like, why can't you just assume that, you know, things are going on and give me some, as we had said in the past, some grace, give me some, text me and say, hey, is everything okay? Want to catch up with you at some point. Then I'll make it a priority. It's just, I don't know. It really has gotten to a point where I really hate people assuming they know, and especially about my time. Because I am somebody who takes relationships seriously. But if it becomes a chore or if you make me feel bad about it, then all of a sudden it's like, you know what? My time is really precious, and if I have to be explaining myself to you, then I don't feel like that's a mutual kind of a relationship. Do you think I'm being harsh, Alyssa?
No, I'm not like the person on the other side of it. So I was listening to you and I was like, I actually am the person that always kind of reaches out to people. When I have some downtime, I kind of shoot off some text messages like, hey, just thinking of you. And I don't always hear back from people. I'm kind of an initiator in that way. And I'll say, hey, I think about you. I'd love to get together. And sometimes I hear back from people and sometimes I don't. But I don't take it personally. I don't, because I assume everybody's got stuff that they have going on, and if they want to hang out, they'll reach back out, and if they don't, maybe they're just busy in that phase of life. Um, so I think that again it's hard because sometimes I'm like, man, I'm always initiating things, I'm always having to reach out to people, but at the same time, I've also kind of accepted like that's my role. Because I have friends that I know since that we really enjoy spending time together. We really love doing stuff, but I'm always the initiator in those types of circumstances. And I've kind of accepted that and realized that, again, if they want to hang out, my first thing is, I'm here. Just kind of a reminder, like I'm here if you want to hang out, you want to do something. Um, but so I definitely hear what you're saying that, it shouldn't feel like a chore. It shouldn't feel like it's so much work to make something happen. Um, and it should be kind of that mutual, like, hey, we'll reach out when we have time or we'll reach out when we can and kind of, leave it at that.
Yeah, I actually had a person who said to me, I'm worried about you because you're not yourself because you used to be so, you would always be reaching out because that was actually my role too. In the past, I was that person who was the initiator, and because I've, sort of redefined myself in a different way, or because I have more activities and more interests that I'm doing, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm worried about you, and I'm worried about how much medication you're on. And I'm like, I'm not on any different medication. Like, why are you making this about me? Like, if you want to reach out, you know, and stop making me feel bad about something because I have all this other stuff going on and I don't expect you to drop everything. But if you want to talk to me, that's lead with that. Lead with, hey, I've got some time, or, you know, can we talk over the weekend or something? And I think part of it is in the approach and delivery, not coming out swinging like, what's wrong with you? Why haven't you called? You don't reach out anymore. And it's like, I feel like that makes like you come out attacking instead of being like inviting. And in our busy lives, we just, there's just everything is competing for your time. And a lot of my time really right now is spent on just re energizing the weekend for my work or my work week. And it's sort of like people don't understand that. Maybe they don't get it. Maybe they think I'm being lazy. And it's like, you know what? It is just what it is. I've been where you've been and I could handle it before. And if I'm not going to allow myself to get to a total meltdown, I need to take care of myself. This is what I need to do. And I'm prioritizing what gives me joy. And I'm not prioritizing things that don't give me joy. And so I think it's difficult. I do think it's difficult. But I think that I did find a solution in that situation. I think that, made it work for both of us, and it's fine. It's going fine, but it's just the approach. I think people need to be a little bit kinder in their approach instead of coming out swinging the way I felt like that was happening.
Yeah, I've had that experience many, many times as well. And so I agree with you. And I think it is about just not making assumptions. And I think that goes kind of full circle to what we're talking about, which is, not taking things personally and not assuming that if somebody, hasn't reached out to you in a while that they're mad at you or that they don't want to, spend time with you. Again, it's about thinking about what might be going on with them. Maybe they're struggling right now and they don't know where to turn. And that, text message or call is going to make all the difference for them. So I think that, as much as I would love to infuse the world with more kindness and less assumptions, I mean, this is just one effort to do that because I think that a lot of times we forget, and do make assumptions. And it happens to all of us. We always have those moments where, you kind of assume that a person's feeling a certain way, but really at the end of the day, you're not going to know unless you talk to them. And, if you're taking it personally that they haven't called you in a couple of days or weeks or whatever the circumstances are, reach out to them, check in with them, and don't go about it like you were saying, Joji, swinging or attacking them because I don't think that that's going to make them open up or, want to kind of bridge that gap any quicker.
And I do think one last thing, because I know, we probably talked about this for as long as we need to, but I also thought about just the differences in generations and just social media and how, like she was saying, my hairstylist was saying, like, should I have put an emoji with the LOL? Would that have felt more full? Like, like this comparison of like these letters. Like, there's a generation that only wants a phone call and loves getting letters or cards in the mail. Younger people, rarely make phone calls. And younger people, I'm really talking about people, maybe high school, college age or in their 20s, where now a lot of communication is in small, short bits of information, right? And an emoji is assumed to say a whole story. And so I think that was also like sarcasm on her part as to like, what is enough now? Like, and how communication has changed because I've had older friends say, oh, would it be so hard to just reach out and make a phone call? And when they have younger grandkids and stuff like that, I just say to them, it's just not the way they communicate. It's not personal. It's not the fact that they don't love you. It's just the fact that at their age, like they don't, they may not even know like what is that? Like a dial tone, like a dial phone even looks like because they don't know what it is. And so it's like instead of reading a lot into it, it's just that things have changed and generationally things are very different. Like, will my grandson actually even know what like a house phone used to be, like a landline was? I mean, his family, his kids, his parents have never had a landline. So they're never going to see that. And so it's just sort of reminding people sometimes too. I mean, in most of our conversations, that's not what it has been about. It's about not taking it personally. But I also wonder, as people, bits of communication do get shorter and shorter, or now like little emojis, little animated figures, are the communication that a lot of people, and I do a lot of that. I do a lot of, thumbs up or a smiley face or, fingers crossed or, just because that's all I need to do. And it's easy. And it's responding in a way that I have time for at the moment. But I do believe that, you sometime we're going to have to string up a lot of emojis to make a conversation because it feels like nowadays that's all there is. What do you think how your kids are going to communicate when and if they ever get their cell phones, Alyssa? Do you think that they even do they have a concept of emojis at this point at their ages? Or is it that they're so far removed from cell phones that that's not even something that they're, has as a concept yet in their heads?
Yeah, my kids don't have that yet. So to be determined. They're hilarious. Like they don't know how to have phone conversations right now. So it's really funny to watch them. Because you have to, I mean, so my oldest is gonna be 9. And she had called her friend to wish her happy birthday, and she didn't know what to say, and so I was, like, coaching her, like, "Say, 'How are you?'" She's like, "How are you?" And the other little girl was like, "I'm well." And she's like,
Silent.
and then there was silence. It was, like, hilarious. I was like, "Ask her what she's doing today." Like, it's just, like, as a prompter of, like, they didn't know how to talk on the phone. But, like, I think we learned a little bit quicker because that's the only way that we communicated. Like, I mean, I think they're just too young now, so I'm hopeful that that will come with time. They'll figure it out, maybe with a little bit more practice, but, I mean, I do think, like, uh I have my younger sister who, we tend to send voice messages to, I at least appreciate that because it's not a text message because I think way too much gets lost in text messages. So there's like this, I can send her a voice message, but sometimes we sent like 6, 7 minute voice messages. I'm like, man, we probably could have just like called each other and it would have been, quicker. Um, so I don't know. I don't know if the concept or communication lines are getting shorter. I do think that a lot of times people use emojis. I don't. I kind of ban them. So I'm not a fan because I think that again a lot gets lost in translation. So I am I like to pick up the phone and talk to somebody if I want to communicate with them, but they don't always have the time. So, I think it goes both ways, but it's definitely something to maybe keep a watch on, and we'll kind of maybe circle back to it at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, anything else you want to tie a ribbon on this conversation before we end it?
No, I don't think I have anything else to put on there other than I hope this was helpful to people. And if you maybe had experience like this recently, I think that this is hopefully opens up a conversation for somebody out there who is thinking about, oh, I just had that experience where I did take it personally. Hopefully, this is helpful to you as you're listening to us today.
Well, thanks everybody for tuning in to another fun episode on The Deconstructed Woman. As Alyssa said, we'd love to hear from you if this resonated with you or you have a personal connection to this or is something that you're working on. We all need support as we're getting through some of these different issues. And so reach out to us on our Facebook community page or by email at thedeconstructedwoman@gmail.com. So we will talk again next time. And until then, have a great rest of your day. Bye. Thank you for listening to our podcast, The Deconstructed Woman. If you liked this podcast, please share it with your friends, rate this episode, or subscribe to be notified of all new content. We want to hear from you, our listener. Do you have thoughts on the discussions we're having? Want to share topic suggestions? Or want to join us for a topic that you're passionate about? Contact us at our email address, thedeconstructedwoman@gmail.com.